Welcome to Codurance Fire Chat, and it's number 13, I believe. So as usual, we have Jose Huertas with us and Sandro
Hey.
Mancuso. And just to iterate that we pick the topic just before we start, and we talk in a very informal way, expressing our opinions, not necessarily the formal opinions, but just to get a debate going is how we used to talk in the evenings and at lunch times. And we thought that we'll start recording that and see if you like it. So if you do like it, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you like, and also provide some feedback and any topics that you feel you'd like us to cover, right? So today we are gonna talk about what makes a senior developer, right? We talk about this junior senior kind of progression as a developer, and we want to talk about whether is it the right way of looking at things, what does it actually mean, and other aspects of this topic. So without further ado, Jose, what do you think what makes a senior developer?
Wow, you went straight for the jugular, no? Well, there are a few things, but I think this is kind of like a very personal topic, no? Like the way that you can approach this is manifold, no? And my personal criteria involves things like how do they deal with uncertainty? Things like being able to be pragmatic, no, and finding that trade-off to get the right balance, no, between accomplishing and getting outcomes, and whatever solution or whatever approach you're following. There are things like whether they have a good let's say organizational awareness or systemic view, right? Like they're not just experts in the technology, but they understand how everything fits together, and they understand the forces at play, and are able to, through their actions, influence that system, no, in many different ways, both technically and in the value creation kind of process, no, and the people in the organization, no, or this is. I know I could go on for it because I've thought about this a little bit, so I have a few, but I don't know. What do you think? So does this sound kind of familiar? Because
Well, yeah, I even wrote about that in the Software Craftsman. I dedicated a part. I just don't remember what I wrote because that was 7 years ago, right? So I'm not quite sure what I wrote back then. I remembered a few things because my opinion remains similar. One thing that seniority is a relative term. I think that the way that I was describing back then was, because I put a lot of thought back then, it was a transient thing, and it was relative. So, for example, senior compared to what? In what kind of context? Right. So that seniority might change depending on what you are comparing it to, yeah, or the subject or the context. And there is an element of being transient as well. It's not like something like a badge that you say, hey, I reached like 5 years or X years in the industry, and now bang, I have a badge and I'm a senior, right? So you might get to a point where you are very familiar in that space. So you have some of the elements that you mentioned, Jose. You have that confidence that you can resolve complex problems, or within the boundaries of that job, you do that job very well. There is very few aspects that you would be a bit uncomfortable, but most of the aspects of that job is a job that you do very comfortably. So in that case, you could be considered as senior. But then there is an element of time as well. If that job is a job that evolves over time, the skills that you need to apply are the skills that evolve, or the context evolve. If you are not evolving with it, the question of being senior I'm not sure if you can be considered a senior anymore. It's not something that you get from this moment in time. I'm always a senior. So this is what I was saying. Like, it's relative and transient in a way.
So I've got a bit of, I guess, a counter to this as well, is that, you say that once you become senior, you don't always remain there. But I think it's true if you think about seniority purely as a function of all these things that we expect from a senior, right? But if you think of seniority as a position, because senior developer is also a position, we hire for senior developer positions, right? And I have known many a senior developer that actually would fail the criteria that you just described because they didn't keep themselves current, they got stagnated, they, for whatever reasons. And this is another thing
or applying to a different context that they are familiar.
Yeah, or they just became senior as a function of because they're the amount of time they've spent there. They've been there for longer than everybody else. But that doesn't say anything about their capability or their knowledge or skill. And they became senior. So senior as a position, do we need to separate senior developer as a position from senior developer from what we think a senior developer should be?
Well, one thing is the senior label, right? It's something that people throw around a lot, but not everyone, is using it in the same to mean the same thing, right? So why don't we get a line first around what we mean by that, and then we can we can separate it into the role, the skills, and so on, right? And go down there. But to me, it is someone who, at least for a big part of what the job entails, they've already reached a certain level of I would say mastery, in the craft, and I'm not talking only about technically, right? I'm talking about everything that is involved in doing the job, and you acquire that through not only the capability but also the experience. They have lived through stuff. It's not just that they can do the work or that they know how to do the work. No, they've done it in the past, and they have sufficient battle wounds to have learned what is not written in the books, right? Like the parts that are that you only get through that experience. So that will be my kind of definition, let's say. Now, whether you apply other criteria to it, like what are the hallmarks for me of what that means, or what kind of characteristics someone who's has that seniority or has that mastery should show, right? That's a different kind of thing. What do you think, Mash or Sandro? Yeah.
No, I think that it's again related to the context, isn't it? Like, so for example, what do you expect from a professional in a certain context? So, for example, there might be a case where I'm expecting someone to really have deep knowledge of a specific technology or cloud provider, right? And they've seen a lot of projects related to that cloud provider or that technology, to the point where they can solve many different types of problems, and they can work significantly independent. And because they've done that a few times, so they master that area. So in that case, they could be considered senior in that area. But if you start involving other things, for example, I would expect someone to lead a team. I would expect someone to advise organizations, or to run projects. So if you start changing the context and the skill set, that person is still a person who has been in the industry for a while, but might not have the necessary expertise to do different types of jobs. So for a different expectation, that person might not fulfill the expectation for a senior. But there are things that maybe there is also another thing to say. That there are something that are skills related or knowledge related. I think that's what you are coming from, Jose. Correct me if I misunderstood. That you learn, let's say, AWS or a specific technology well enough to do most of the job related to that. But there are things that there's no amount of reading and studying will give you. You need to live through that period. For example, being in a software project. So there's no way you can learn what it is to be in a software project just reading books. You need to be in one project after another over an extended period of time. So working in a software project for different organizations is a thing that only time can teach you. All this accumulation of experiences is what make you a senior. And there is no way to speed that up. There's no amount of reading. Reading can give you knowledge, but certain things you cannot speed up. You need time, right? So you need time to do a job consistently. One of the things that I was speaking to some of our guys was like, it's not just about doing the job once, but it's doing enough times to the point that you got so comfortable doing that you don't even feel that you are doing that anymore. Right, so that it doesn't take a toll. If you're running a project, running a team, or doing certain activities, you do that with ease, without taking a toll. At that point, you can say, like, in this kind of area, this kind of work, I probably have some seniority. That's how I see this.
There is so much to unpack out of this, because there is a thing about, you talked about seniority as like technical knowledge, right? So I know a lot about AWS. I've got all the certifications. I know how to set up everything.
That was one of the things that I mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. Not all.
No, of course. Now I'm gonna go through because
unpack. Okay.
I don't think that makes you senior, because I think that is a very specialized knowledge applicable in a specialized context. But as we are talking about senior developer, and is in certain contexts it's essential, at least for someone in the team to have. Does that make you senior developer? That actually assumes that you are constantly having to apply that knowledge all the time, and you're not gonna, right? So for example, as an AWS person, like solution architect or whatever, you will have a specific time where your knowledge is essential, but that's not all the time. Maybe in the beginning and at some points but it's not, you don't apply that knowledge over and over again on a daily basis, right? So you are a specialist. You can come in as an advisor. That's why, for example, AWS has solution architects who what they do is they're not developers. They come in, they advise, and they go out, right? That does not make them a senior developer. I'm just kind of going through and just thinking about it in my head, right? Then there is the whole aspect of experience as well, because it's not enough to say that I have a lot of experience in a particular thing, because actually two things. One is the diversity of experience, and the other one is that how you internalize that, because actually it's not the experience that matters. It's the fact that as software projects are always novel, they're unique, right? If you have a diversity of experience and you've seen many different things, what that gives you is a better chance of taking that next unique situation and be able to make some kind of an informed decision and lead, right? So when we talk about experience, we are talking about you've gathered enough body of knowledge through experience that you can now see the subtleties and tailor it to the next situation and identify the next situation. So again, experience in itself is not enough, right? So the way I see seniority is that if you talk about a senior developer, is someone who can lead in a development effort, but given all the novel things that are thrown at you, both from a technical perspective and an organizational perspective. right? And that requires skill in certain areas, requires knowledge in many areas, and a diversity of experience on which you kind of sit on, so that you can actually tackle the next problem that will come that you don't know what it will look like.
If I may add a couple of things there, because for me that journey is we're all in that kind of learning journey. If you go I don't know to martial arts, and the whole Shuhari, the path to mastery, where you first marry the technique and you execute as is, and then you start deviating, and then you can completely forget and create, and so the thing is, we're all going through that path in many areas. Yeah. So you could be starting, if you don't know anything about, I don't know, AWS, right? You're starting and you're going through tutorials and that kind of stuff. As you as you evolve, that progression comes into play. And for me, when I was talking about has gone through that path for the job, I didn't mean in one particular area. I meant it as the collection of the different skill sets and the different situations that you need to be proficient with, or you need to be
disciplines, almost
almost exactly the different disciplines, and if you link that to what that learning is, there's this thing called the Bloom's taxonomy of learning, which is basically another pyramid that sort of like shows how let's say the level of maturity of that learning, right? Where you at the bottom you have people that are able to maybe recall or understand a concept, but then all the way to the top you have the creation aspect, or the evaluation aspect of things. You're able to look at things, know the trade-offs, act on it, and all of those require different levels of let's say practice to some extent in order to achieve them, right? Like, so when I'm talking about that, the re part, I've achieved certain mastery, is you're able to work at all of those different layers, I would say, for the particular job, that we're talking about. Yeah, that's the way that. And one thing I know, Sandro, and one thing that I also forgot to mention, and Sandro mentioned, is that this is all successfully. You need to add the success, because there are people being in the job, for 10 years, right? And they keep doing the same thing that they did, on year one. It's the same year repeated several times, right? So
yeah, we
for
talk
me, there's
about
that
10 years of experience or 1 year of experience 10 times.
Exactly.
But see, like this is. Can you hear me well now? Because like
no problem.
Cool. I was having problems before. So this is what I wanted to I wanted to make like almost a devil's advocate, because like there is like what we consider senior given our context. So given the type of company we are, given the type of professionals that the three of us are, we have our own idea of seniority. But now I'm just thinking with myself and sharing with you, like just thinking out loud. So for example, do we define seniority according to the boundaries of our job, our company? For example, given the company we have, given the kind of professions we are, we define the boundaries of that professional, and within those boundaries, we create a sense of scale. But for example, a company, again, just doing the devil's advocate, that would, let's say, box a developer a little bit more than we do. Yeah, say I want to hire a Java developer, or I want so they will box the person a little bit more. They would really squeeze the definition or the boundaries of that role. So in that case, the seniority is also squashed in that boundaries. Does it make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, and it does for me, and this is why when I was trying to kind of like define it in my head, I mentioned that the criteria that you use to evaluate is different than what. No, I talked about the path and being having achieved certain mastery and doing things successfully now. No, whether you consider something successful or no, that's an evaluation part, right? And that's what I think is different. No, in every organization, no, if you're interviewing for a job or whatever, right? And this is why we all have our different criterias for this, no? So for me, it makes total sense. Total sense, yeah.
And as we were talking, I just realized that it's not only about the organizations; the individuals do that themselves, right? Each one of us would also define the scope of our work, the scope of like the range of things that we want to do, or we like doing, or we think we should do to in our jobs. And some individuals will narrow that more than others. And see what I'm saying? So it's not only the companies dictating, but the individuals themselves also just might create certain limits.
And that actually leads me to another thought, right? So of course there is the senior developer as evaluated as senior by someone, right? Whether that is somebody or yourself. So but is there a type form, a more universal definition of a senior developer, right? And without taking into like context, a organization that may narrow, and of course everyone will narrow, right? Whether it's yourself or someone else, even we narrow, right? In fact, we often talk about, when we look at people, we work in a particular context, and all the skills that we value, they may not necessarily be the skills that another company, a product company, for example, may value, although there's a huge overlap there. But is there a more universal, taking it to some level of abstraction, is there a more universal definition or criteria for being senior? And I'm just thinking out loud here, but is it more related to, at the end of the day, like, a software developer develops software, and so are there certain set of skills and disciplines that you need to master in a kind of a more slightly out of context, that actually you need to look at across them, and then talk about how you drive the impact, how you develop good software for a particular purpose. And so kind of trying to come up with something a bit more abstract that can be considered a bit more standardized as a definition of a senior developer, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can try. Again, running the risk of being biased towards what we do and who we are and so on and so forth, right? But I think that as a developer, in terms of seniority, there are the aspect of your area of expertise, right? So you are working in a wider context, so you play a role. Every person within a context, they play a role in that team, in that organization and stuff. So in the role that you play, you bring that expertise that is related to the role. So as a developer, I would expect you to understand your systems well. A senior developer, I would expect a senior developer to understand the technical solutions, the existing technical implementation, technical solutions extremely well, and also have a much wider knowledge than what is being used in the company, so that this person has enough skills and knowledge to keep evolving that context with new technologies, modern practices, and so on and so forth. So this is one element, is the element of the expertise that you as a professional bring to the table when combined with other people. And then there is the skills of being able to collaborate with all those people, right? So you are the expert, right, in the technology. But then I would expect a senior person to be interested in solving big problems. So a senior person for me is someone that needs to understand the big picture, understand the role that they play, and be able to interact with all the neighboring disciplines and people as well. So that is another thing that I would expect from a senior developer, someone that is interested in providing a solution to a problem and have the curiosity to understand this problem.
So, I mean, so we can point back to, as leaders of a software consultancy, where we have to make this kind of, we have to think about this all the time, because we are constantly thinking about who is suitable for what role and in which project. And maybe it's worth bringing in the disciplines that we care for, right? So, you talked about the expertise, and for developers, we think of that as technical mastery, right? But it's one of the 5 or 6 different disciplines that we look at. I mean, technical mastery is only one discipline, right? So is it worth talking about all these different disciplines, or at least mentioning them to say, well, actually, when you think about yourself as a senior developer, you're not just talking about technical mastery. I mean, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of experience attached to that. But unfortunately, it's not the only thing. There's many other things. What do you think?
I can jump if you want to go, Jose, or I can.
No, I think we can go through that. I just feel like to some extent, the question everyone says is like, how do I know if this person that I'm interviewing is a senior or not, or how do I know? That's kind of
how do I know that I am senior?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or I am senior, right? So, talking about the the different how did you call it, Mash?
Disciplines?
Disciplines or areas that we look at. That's just, how we approach this, right? Based on our context and so on. And this is why at the beginning, when you asked me the question, I didn't particularly go down that route, although I was thinking of particular, expectations around behaviors or situations and how they handle that, right? So let's do that pass, and then we can go back to some of the things that I mentioned, because I think focusing on those kind of gives you, independently of whatever classification you use, it puts you in the situation where you can evaluate whether that's what you want. At least from my perspective, that's what I look for, right? So let's do that. Why don't we go through them and maybe afterwards give it a go.
Why don't we start? So
I don't know, leadership. That's one of the main things. Being a consultancy, a lot of the time, what we look for in our senior people is that they are able to lead the team, the client, and send towards a successful outcome, right? And it seems like leading in this kind of like taking the lead and being the the one saying what to do, but that's not entirely true. That sometimes it means doing it, right? Doing that. Other times it means following. Other times it means coaching people and growing them and bringing them together and so on. So it's a very open definition on what are the kind of behaviors that we look for.
Other times it means informing,
sending
the right information kind of up and down if there are hierarchies or adjacent and so on, right? So yeah, there's many elements, I guess, to leadership, right?
Yeah.
So pick another one. Yeah.
No. So just before we move, like there are some elements, just to give more clarity, that a lot of people associate leadership with just being the team lead, being the project lead or whichever, or manager of something, right? So, and I think that the way that we talk about leadership is not only formal leadership, but also informal leadership, right? So for me, like a senior person, even if that person doesn't have a formal leadership, they behave in a certain way that they are informal leaders.
Let me tweak that, and
Right.
even
Okay.
though that person doesn't have a formal authority, which is what you're talking.
Yeah, the formal position. Yes,
exactly. The authority to, through power,
Yeah.
kind of like enforce whatever point of view they have. No, being the technical lead or the manager or whatever. Right. So just know, because I know what you're talking about, but
In fact,
make it clear to
can
everyone.
happen.
Having formal authority doesn't automatically make you a leader, or at least a good leader.
That's true. That's true. We can go down the rabbit hole.
Exactly. We'll probably, like, we've been cooking like an episode, like we've been saying that we would have a full episode in leadership at some point, right? But it's good to just expand a little bit so people understand where we are coming from when we talk about leadership. It's not only about the team lead, the whatever manager, so on. It is the ability to lead people even informally. It's like take people in a journey. It's like when there is a problem, there is a conflict, we are able to resolve that gracefully. And you are able to put ideas forward. We are able to have people buying into those ideas, right? So there is a sense of ownership as well. Like a leader normally feels that responsibility and accountability, or they feel ownership for their project, their team, and so on and so forth. So there are loads of, there is the strategic thinking as well. A leader needs to think much broader. They need to have a much wider vision as well. So there are many aspects. So when you talk about seniority, and if you talk about seniority within leadership, those are certain aspects of leadership that I personally, for example, would be looking at.
But what other areas do we have there?
We have client engagement as one of them.
Yeah, I mean, client engagement is very, well, of course, it's not specific, but it's very important for us because for us, like, client engagement is way more, because our people are working outside the context of the current organization, right? So they are employed by one company and they're working with other company, and often they are sat there where it's all not always natural to have all those lines of communication established. And that's why we put a lot of emphasis on that, right? Although it is important even in non-consultancy aspects, right? But fear of I almost feel that, I know I asked for this, but I almost feel that each one of these is a talk on its own. But I mean, just going through, I think another one that may be actually much more of interest to people is not the only one, is effectiveness, right? I find, and effectiveness is a key aspect of being senior, right? Because it actually speaks to you about driving impact. And it's the way we deal with it is that often all of these other disciplines, we have kind of different levels of complexity and scale dimension, like, in terms of the context that you operate in, at which level you are of seniority. But effectiveness, we feel that is actually, it's such an individual thing. There's no real levels to it. You need to be effective in what you do, the way you organize yourself, the way you drive impact, the way you learn, the way you conduct meetings or facilitate, and all those things. And of course, it kind of plays with all other disciplines. But being effective and driving impact, being making sure that you understand that what you do is there. There's this action and there's this outcome, right? And that you have, like, you kind of maximize outcome with your action. And this again talks to you about seniority and mastery. It's like, when you talk about martial arts and all these things, that every action is taking you forward in the impact that you are trying to, or the objective
outcome
that you have,
that,
right?
that you're trying to achieve. Yeah.
There is one thing that I want to bring to effectiveness. I don't remember us discussing that in the past, but I just came to my mind now. Because like, what do we mean by being effective? Well, we get stuff done with a good degree of quality, right? So like, it's not just you get some shit done fast. It's like with the expected level of quality, whatever that might be in whichever task.
For me, it involves a bit more, right? Like
no, I'm just trying to summarize, because like as Matt said, we can talk about this, just one of those areas for a full episode, but there is more. But anyway, which one would you add? But I would like to complement with something else.
For me, effectiveness is also about reaching that outcome. Which is not, because yes, the quality and all those things, we feel like that's the way to move forward, right? But it's also about, did we achieve what we were trying to achieve?
The quality part of the outcome?
No, yeah, I added that as part of the getting things done, and that's why I was like, so you reach the outcome, so whatever definition of done you might have.
Outcome, like the thing that's done with quality. I always think that when you talk about outcome, you talk about quality, and you talk about the end state.
Yeah, the reason that I end up emphasizing that is because, like, quite often we've seen that the end goal justified the means, and we feel people like focusing on the getting something done at the expense of something else, right? So, and quite often we see in projects where they say, hey, let's get these features done at the expense of creating a lot of technical debt, and we already had an episode on that. But again, as long as we define that, like in terms of effectiveness, let's say that there is a done criteria, and that includes all the quality.
Yeah,
that is part of.
I mean, I personally, cutting corners just to get something out, I wouldn't call that effective.
Yeah, no,
it's to
I
the
agree.
effect that you were looking for. Yeah. Did you achieve the effect? Is that like the impact? That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not the point that I wanted to discuss, because all of those we had discussions before. Like we were still talking about seniority, like being effective, but as a senior. Right. And the point that I was thinking was, a lot of things that we do on a day-to-day don't depend just on us. Right. So, for example, you might be part of a team and you want to work in a specific way, but you are blocked by something. Right. Maybe the ways that the builds are set up, or whatever process people might have, or dependency on another team. And your context might be a block, or might impact negatively your effectiveness. And for me, seniority in terms of effectiveness means being able to identify what's making you less effective and resolve them and remove those blocks so that you can work more effectively. And that for me would be part of it. See what I'm saying? Not just say, oh, yeah, I cannot go faster because
I totally agree. And that's, in fact, that's why I actually said that in order to be effective, all the other disciplines kind of come into it, because in fact, leadership derives from being effective, right? As you know, I need to be effective, and there are these blockers in my way, and they are organizational, they are process related, and I need to be able to remove those blockers to be effective. Yeah. Right. So of course, that's why we have quite a few of these disciplines, because they interact. Right. Yeah. You can't be just effective even at an individual level if you are working in isolation, because things will get in your way, and you won't derive the actual outcome from your actions.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because in a team, for example, you can have like different roles, and let's say that you work in a normal agile fashion, and basically there are all the refinements, and so basically so everyone, like we did some thinking, prioritization, refinement, and acceptance criteria, all that kind of good stuff, just getting one user story after another and getting them done. When all the blocks have been removed, is basically just get on with that story and get the story done. For a more junior person, that would be a sign of effectiveness. They can take something that is very well defined and get that done according to the definition of done, right? With that threshold of qualities and so on. But for a more senior person, just the fact, like being able to prioritize a backlog, to come up with those acceptance criteria, speak to whoever they need to speak, so that they can enable the team to be effective. So they need to remove all those blocks. They need to change. They need to talk to a lot of people so that the whole team is effective. And for me, that's where the seniority level starts moving up. My expectation from a senior person in terms of effectiveness becomes much broader than just get one piece of work with no blocks done.
But then again, this is very, it's related to that evaluation of the seniority, because to some extent, how do you evaluate that? You look for certain behaviors, or certain outcomes that you expect a person with that degree of knowledge or mastery to be able to accomplish, or to reach. And this is, again, how we kind of define some of these things, but they may be a bit different, in other organizations, or it may be something that is expected even at someone with, who's earlier in their journey, should still be able to do those things. And it's also very dependent on the role, right? Like I would expect a product owner, because the role is basically, that's core to what the role needs to do. To be able to do that, even if they are just starting in the profession. So again, this is why I'm, I'd rather talk about the classifications and how we kind of, the minute that we start going into how we apply those different degrees, this is where things start breaking down, because it's very different for every organization. No?
Yeah, true. It's just some things are higher priority than others, right? In terms of how you evaluate either yourself or your employer evaluates your seniority, right? So the other thing is, but these things in a way they do apply, other than maybe client engagement, unless you kind of call it stakeholder engagement or something else, but it does. But the like other thing I was thinking, maybe we should gonna go through them fairly quickly, because I'm conscious of time a bit as well, but we need to maybe have a quick talk about teamwork, for example. And that's another discipline that we have, that we look at when we are looking at seniority, right?
Yeah, so this is not only being able to work as a team, but also dealing with all the people related stuff of being in a team, like providing feedback, dealing with conflict, good communication, all of these things are part of that.
And overall look at team health as well. Like the happiness of your team is not, it's also your individual concern, right?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the aspect that when I think about a senior person in the context of a teamwork, this is the first thing that comes to my mind, that this person is able to look after the health of that team. And the health, like for example, because people will disagree, right? So there's always like people who have different opinions about things. They all have good intentions. Most people want to get things done and done well, right? So they just might diverge in how they want to get in there. And for me, like a senior person is the one that will bring order to chaos, right? But in a without creating more chaos, right? So they bring order in a way that everyone is satisfied with that decision, even when they disagree. We even use that term, the disagree and commit, right? Is a senior person for me is almost like there are two aspects. There is the being able to manage conflicts within the team and align them all together, right? Provide that guidance. That is one aspect. But they are also, I see them as the safe harbor for younger or less experienced professionals. For example, when the team needs to do something that is critical, that is difficult, or they are in a difficult situation, they will be looking at this person, and this person needs to be calm. They are the safe harbor. They are saying, okay, you know what? This person will, they know.
Help. And they're my net, they're my safety net. If I am in trouble, I can rely on them basically.
Exactly. So they serve as the safe harbor. They say, you know what? It's fine, everyone. We are gonna go through this, right? Let's sit down. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. So they provide that experience, that calmness in that direction. So for me, this is quite key when I think about a senior person. They will not make this ever the situation worse than they are. On the contrary, they will. So that's one of the things.
Within their means.
Yeah. But they should be the ones, like, even when they are in a conflict, in a direct conflict with someone. Let's say there is a member of the team that is a bit hard work. Let's say the senior person cannot be the one that you lose their temper.
Yeah.
Right. That is the whole point of being senior. They've been in that situation over and over again. They've been part of multiple teams. They dealt with difficult characters, either team members or stakeholders or whoever else. So they've dealt with a situation multiple times. They know how to manage those situations. And on top of providing the technical guidance, whichever area of expertise they have, they will also provide that guidance and stuff. But those are, in terms of teamwork, that's what I imagine a senior is, the safe harbor, the person that will bring order to chaos and carry the team forward.
I have to say that may not be bringing order. For me, it's more about how you navigate uncertainty and chaos, and because there may not be a way to order that chaos. If that's the situation, like, a lot of those things may be out of your control. What is not out of your control is how you react to those, right? And I feel like that's a different way of putting it, or it gets the same idea, but it's not so much about this, or because you may not be able to order.
No, it was just a metaphor. Like what I meant by it. It was not meant to be taken literally. It's more literally, like, okay. It's to decide, like, a way forward. Given the situation that we have, let's calm down, let's relax.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
and let's put a plan forward.
We don't know now. This is what we're going to do. Exactly. We don't know now. This is what we're going to do. And then if this doesn't work, this is what we're going to do. And then if this doesn't work, like, you already have a mindset of, figuring out what needs to be done and being able to explore or get the information that you need in order to do it independently of, it's not, for me, it's not so much about, following the plan. It's about adapting as well. Yeah. Right. And that's what I meant.
Yeah. So I have a couple more things that I, again, conscious of time. One is that last discipline that we look at, I think is worth mentioning because we mentioned the other, which is consultancy. Which is the act of advisory, right? Being an advisory and being able to look at novel situations, gathering context quickly, bearing your experiences and also experiences of your organization to bear, and coming up, agreeing away. Well, first of all, agreeing on the problem, helping come up with solutions, a variety of solutions, and choosing the right path through them towards execution. We talked about consultancy quite a bit, I think, in one of our previous Fireside Chats as well, right?
Yeah, we had a full episode on consultancy or consultancy as a skill, right? Yeah. But there is one thing that is related to consultancy, but it's also related to effectiveness that I would like to bring. That even effectiveness is what is it called? All about perception. Is all about expectation, right? So, for example, how effective you are is relative according to which expectation. Mm-hmm. So you see what I'm saying? So, and for me, both from different perspectives, but both consultancy and effectiveness, there is a good element in there from a senior person of expectation management at all levels, not only about your end customer or stuff, but from your team members, right? From your peers. So it's managing that expectation. For me, a senior person is someone that manages expectations really well. So whatever we decide to do or whatever happens, they will manage expectations, right? So, and there's never surprise. They work in a way that even when there is a bad surprise, they are able to report that quickly and manage that expectation. Okay, this might happen. Those are the risks. Those are the possible outcomes, and they are always managing expectation. And for me, a senior person would work in a way where there's never big surprises. Even when there is a negative thing, normally, for most of the time, not always, it's impossible to say always, but like most of the times a senior manager would talk about risks. Say like, we can do that, but there is a degree of uncertainty in there. There is a degree of risk in there. So they are managing that expectation.
There was a Freudian slip in there, Sandro. You said senior manager and not senior developer.
Oh, did I? Jeez. Okay. But for me, a senior professional, right? A senior developer and stuff. So for me, it's part of the seniority of managing expectations.
Yeah, it's like, when we talk about communication, that's actually what we mean, right? Is that, you're really looking at everyone and who needs to have what information and how quickly, and that transparency element and all those things, but also always providing options, solutions, kind of keeping a positive mindset, so that when you're working with people, even when surprises hit, and they often do, that you are managing them. You are the, as a senior developer, you're the ones who is getting to the root causes, communicating them well, and helping to understand what kind of solutions that may be, and providing them. So you're not there just pointing at the problem and then kind of, help being part of the kind of the panic team, but you're the one who is. And I guess this is what we were talking about in terms of navigating chaos, right? Rather, that if something happens that's unexpected, that's not planned, that is not positive in terms of your outcome, that you are navigating those situations and finding the right kind of plan. Just before we kind of, I'd like to stop that one there, because one thing I want to talk about, I think there is I think it's an interesting question, is that, we talk about senior developers and we talk about junior developers. At what point do I go from a junior to senior, or even just a developer to senior developer? Is there a point? Is there a kind of a tipping point where I can start considering myself senior?
I'm gonna go first with this one. Yeah. So I already hinted at this. I feel like we are all going through that journey at the same time in many different areas, right? So maybe, you have more experience managing projects, or maybe you had more experience with this particular technology, and there you're kind of mastering that. But there are other areas where you're just starting, right? Like maybe, I don't know, the communication aspect of things is not something that you're too. So for me, that idea of, reaching the destination to some extent is not entirely, true. It's the mountain without a peak, right? Like you can always continue climbing, and the chances are that you're climbing at different levels in different kind of mountains. No, so that's one aspect. Regarding the question of when can you, consider yourself going back to that, is there's two things here. One is you or others, right? Consider, that there's this whole idea of, if people think that you are, it's probably because, you've shown that you have that degree of mastery. So for me, it's about being recognized in others, and having the second point is having the humility, to understand that there is still a lot more to go. Right, like avoid the Dunning-Kruger effect, and try to understand that, as I said before, you're gonna start our journey again, as soon as a new technology comes over, or you find yourself in a new situation where your skills are not, at that level they require in order to do that successfully, right? So that for me would be it's about others recognizing the level of mastery, right, in that particular thing, and two, your understanding of what that mastery is, right? Like that let's say humble take on the proficiency, or the seniority, right?
The beginner's mind.
Beginner's mindset. The
Cultivating the beginner's mind. You know that you are mastering this area, but that does not then taint or even deter you from being a beginner elsewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I have a similar take on this, but I'll try to use a metaphor. So I think that from the person's perspective, I totally agree. The beginner's mind. I think it's very difficult for us to say, I'm really senior. We are always be thinking, there are a few things that I can do, but there are too many others that I cannot do. So we always have that vision. And if you imagine like a cone, an upside down cone, or an inverted pyramid, as we mentioned.
Pyramid. Another
pyramid.
There is another pyramid.
I tried to use the word cone just to avoid the pyramid, but it didn't work. So, but imagine an inverted pyramid where, like, at the very bottom, you are very focused in very few disciplines. And for me, the thing about becoming senior, I don't think that there is I wouldn't be able to say there is a line that you cross. I think that there is a journey that you are in. And I think that the classification of senior is similar to what Jose said. It's like, at some point, certain organizations in a specific context will perceive you as a senior, right? So by whatever criteria. But for me, the seniority has a journey. So, and if you go back to the inverted pyramid, at the beginning, you are very focused in very few disciplines. And over time, you start performing those things with ease, right? So, and as you are doing that with ease, you start opening up the funnel and acquiring more skills, and you start doing more things around. And then gradually you are doing them well as well. We've done that a few times, and now you are comfortable in doing that. And as you do that, you keep opening up the amount of things that you learn and the amount of things that you do with ease. It's not exactly linear, it's not exactly appearing, but I think you get the idea. So I think that for me, the path for seniority is when you keep opening up the amount of things that you can do, or the amount of things that you know, and also that you can do with ease. That you can do ease. That's what's like, okay, this person is quite senior in these aspects because, this person will get the job done, right? Let's say. So that's how I see this.
It's actually in mastery. There is, when the skill becomes innate, when you internalize something, I think I
was looking
intrinsic.
for this word in my head, like innate or intrinsic. I was looking for those words and it didn't come to me.
Yeah, no worries.
it becomes second nature. No, you don't even have to think about it. No, it's so ingrained in your behavior and your way of acting. No, that it's there. It's second nature. No, and this is also something that I feel. Going back to the point of being humble and that kind of stuff, when you find that you're having to teach people, or that people are challenging certain assumptions, one of the best things for me at least is going and revisiting why the why for some of these things, right? Because it allows you to keep that beginner's mindset, no, and come at it with fresh eyes, no. And recently we were in the book club, we were rereading, Extreme Programming Explained, which is a book, I read years ago, no, and you kind of went through it. Oh, this is great, but then coming back to it years afterwards, no, and being able to go through it and see the details, no, the subtleties of some of the wording that he's using, and some of that's a different thing, no. So
definitely cool.
So are we finishing it now, or because we could there's one more thing, which is how do I recognize? Which is when we started. No, the question you asked me was, what is a good, senior developer for you? No, and it was kind of like,
yes,
because it was going to the evaluation, the criteria and so on. And for me personally, I try to look for things that are more general than just the kind of categorizations that we have, and the kind of behaviors. And one of those things is how people deal with frustration, how people deal with chaos or uncertainty. Are they able to understand that something can be good and bad at the same time? Right? Like, because this is another thing, right? Like, that it's not black and white. A lot of the time the experience tells you it's not black and white, it's all trade-offs. It's all, and understanding that is key, I would say, independently of the technologies or the specific domain. So those are some of the ones that I look for. What about you guys? When you're kind of interviewing someone, or you're looking to evaluate that level of seniority, if you will, what are the kind of things that you're looking for?
Okay, I'll personally, I look at, you talked about this subtlety, this deepness of thought, right? Because I often like when I am evaluating people, especially in interviews, I'm looking for the subtlety of their thought processes, and have they gone deeper into certain things, like asking that why question over and over again, or asking certain questions that they're not talking about definitions, or they're not even talking about experiences. They're talking about novel connections, right? So trying to connect things that they may not have thought about. And, of course, an interview situation is a bit for a difficult situation for people to be relaxed into, to then to kind of think a bit more deeply. But when I think about seniority, I normally think about how subtle are they in their thinking? How do they see the nuances? And that to me speaks of knowledge, skills, experience, rather than just the kind of the normal definitions, or the ability to solve an existing problem, or the knowledge of a particular technology or a platform, or those kind of things.
Yeah, for me is I would be lying if I said that I could evaluate the things that I look for in an interview. I think that I do my best, but I find it difficult. But there are things that I'm looking at. First of all, again, we are talking about senior people, right? So in terms of seniority, I look a little bit for breadth of knowledge in multiple areas, not only on the technical areas, but all the different areas that we talked about here, right? So how much do they know about the whole environment? And I would also look for depth. There are certain skill sets that I would expect a lot of depth. Right, so I will look at that combination, a good amount of depth in certain areas, but a good breadth in other areas. But there are, and on the more how can I say, like consultancy skills as we defined before, but like I would look for the ownership as well. So the attitude that the person has in taking the sense of ownership. Like say, what, like if I'm doing something, I'll own it at all aspects, right? So I won't just be boxed in my job. I'll try to get this done, and I'll do whatever it takes to get it done. In terms of whatever it takes, I will speak to the client. I will resolve conflicts. I will talk to other departments. I will try to get that goal achieved.
It's important there, because I know where you're coming from. Now you're coming a bit from the the extreme ownership kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. And it's important for the people who are watching know that it's not about just owning, it's about owning the result as well, right? Like if things went wrong, it's not because someone else did something, the looking for a scapegoat or trying to justify what happened. It's about
blame the company, blame the culture, blame like the politicians, blame the whole world, right? But,
yeah, exactly, and that's I think you're trying to illustrate that with the different points, no? But it's an important aspect, because the approaching things as in I have agency, right? And if things happen, there are things that I could have done, right? Or there are things that I need to do if I don't want this to be the end result. Gives you a completely different perspective, a more active, or proactive way of thinking. And this is something that a lot of the time is lacking in people who have very good technical skills, or have it's always someone else's issue, right?
It allows you to learn as well, right? When you come from the mindset that I have agency, that I could have pulling different levers could have achieved a different result. What it allows you to do is to learn, right? If you don't own that, then you actually stunt your own learning for the future.
Yeah. So even like those things, for example, those are very difficult to interview for. But for example, normally when I ask people, I'm giving some of the questions away, but like I normally ask, why are you leaving? Why are you moving on and stuff? And I also ask things like, for example, what you didn't like in the process that you had, and so on and so forth. And I normally see it that some people will really blame someone else. And when it's the case, I will always say, like, what have you done about? What are the things that you try to do to change that situation? And if I feel that, for example, the person, oh, you know what, you cannot change anything. Oh, no, this is the way it is and stuff. That for me, like the seniority criteria starts eroding in a way, because I would expect, of course, even if you are not able to do, but I would expect a senior person to at least try and be able to describe that was the context. That's what we tried to do. That was the outcome. I would expect that methodical way of thinking and addressing problems, even if they didn't achieve the results and got frustrated, that's okay. I would accept that. But I would be looking for ways, a methodical way of addressing problems in a senior person.
Yeah. Cool. All right. I think we're already past our hour mark. We can stop here. So
cool.
Yeah.
Sounds
Is there
good.
any final thoughts, or have you made the final thoughts?
No, I think so. I think I made my final thoughts.
How are you, Jose?
Same.
Okay, cool. Well, as usual, if you like these discussions, subscribe so you're aware, and also give us feedback and recommend other topics to discuss. And thank you very much for listening.
Yeah. See you next time.
See you in the next one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.